Welcome to Can I Be Blunt, where every so often I chat with members of the BDSM community about femdom, DS relationships, fetishes, and kink. I'm Mistress Danielle Blunt, a professional and lifestyle dominatrix with over 14 years of experience. Listen in while I interview my Twitter colleagues, about their thoughts on everything from orgasm control and cuckolding to age play and foot worship. These conversations are raw, intimate, unedited, and personal. And what I mean by that is that I didn't want to spend time editing this into a highly produced show. So, enjoy the authentic and unedited conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Can I Be Blunt, which is a podcast, a blog, a YouTube channel, and maybe more, where I chat with sex workers and members of the kink community from everything about femdom, submission, DS relationships, and sex work. And today I am thrilled to be here with Cupcake Sinclair, and I would love if you could introduce yourself. I've been such a fan of your work for so long, and I'm just so thrilled to chat with you today.
Oh my God, I'm so flattered. I'm Cupcake Sinclair. I am a professional and lifestyle submissive. I also do, adult video content. I do sideshow work. I do admin. I do kink and, general sex education. And I've been doing all of this since around 2014, 2015. So yeah, I'm kind of a jack of all trades within the sex work world, but my main focuses are, being a professional submissive and exploring all of the venues throughout that can be explored. So
I love that. And I've definitely chatted with a more dominant crowd, like pro doms on this site. And I think partially because there are just more pro doms, like when you're like doing research, for people to see, I feel like there's so many fewer people who are advertising for professional submission. And I'd be really curious to start with a little bit of like how you found your way into this scene, both lifestyle and professionally.
Absolutely. So let's see. Lifestyle, I was definitely one of those people where I didn't have a lot of friends. Like I'm a failed English major. So like reading and literature and all of that kind of stuff is my jam. And so I always found myself, drawn to works like Marquise de Sade and all of those different sorts of, that's a little weird for reading material, but I was always so fascinated and engaged by it. And so, through that, I was able to start learning more and more about, lifestyle things, about poly things, because, if you give a mouse a cookie, you go from Marquise de Sade to, okay, well, how does this correlate to real world things? And then you start reading books about people who are actually in the lifestyle and going from there. I discovered FetLife. I was able to, start going to classes and munches and then eventually start going to play parties. And after a couple of months of doing like play parties, there was a main dungeon that I was always going to. And I was going there so often for like all of the workshops and classes and events and things like that, all of the staff knew me, all of the people who went there knew me. And I was always like there helping after hours, cleaning up after parties. And, I really enjoyed it. I mean, you find your tribe and you're really excited to be around them as much as you can. And so I think one night after a party, I was helping clean up and I was like, complaining about something work related. I was working in IT at the time, and they were like, well, we're also a professional house. We've got pro doms and pro switches and pro stuff. And it didn't even like click for me. It didn't even dawn on me like that, I was even eligible to be part of those things. And so I was able to be hired by Sanctuary LAX out in Los Angeles. And start working as a pro sub for them. And I feel very fortunate because my knowledge about the lifestyle world was also going hand in hand with my knowledge as a professional submissive. And so I was able to grow both of those things together at the same time, which I feel like is kind of a unique experience. And I feel very fortunate to be able to do that because I get to see the breadth of how everyone else interprets things, engages with their play, and where that works for me and how that, feels most comfortable.
I love that. I feel like it's often rare to have like the lifestyle and the professional aspect go hand in hand like that. That's also my experience of like finding out this whole kink world and like delving really deeply into it and being like, yes, this is a much better way to make it income than anything I've found, and like really an interesting way to get to know people and what I'm hearing while you're talking about like your pursuit of kink is like this deep curiosity. And like I'm sure we have this in common, it sounds like, of just like when I was like studying in school, I felt like getting a whole separate degree in like BDSM. Like my like bedside table was like stacked with like Justine Juliet, just like all of the like psychological books on, I was a psych major, like on BDSM and like paraphilias. And I was just like, I just like wanted to read and learn absolutely everything. And I think there's another part of it, of a really cool part of doing it professionally, is that you get so many like hours of it in a way that you don't necessarily in lifestyle, that you really get to get like this fluency in what you're doing. And I'm curious what your experience is as a professional sub. I think one thing I really like about being a pro dom in the sex work that I do is that kind of like me having like really firm and strict boundaries are kind of like baked into the persona, and something that I like respect so much playing with, like having pro subs join for sessions and like just my pro sub friends, is how incredible of a skill it is to be able to like surrender in the session while creating the space for like both of you to be as safe as possible, and like just like holding that space while also the space is for you to like surrender in that. And I'm curious about what that's like, and if that resonates to you at all, and how you approach your work as a pro sub.
No, absolutely. And I think you're spot on. Yeah, I'm always very fascinated by people. I took a couple of semesters in like anthropology and cultural anthropology, to be specific. And so, just even then, just on a general basis, learning about people, I always found really fascinating. So when I found something that was like really in tune with me in terms of like sexuality and exploring different nuances of how you express yourself through those types of more quote unquote taboo connections. It always blew my mind seeing how everyone found different ways that, they came together through it, even though everyone comes to it at such different ways. So yeah, in my sessions as a professional submissive, I feel very fortunate that I'm able to a lot of times either foster a space for people who are also new to this, where, they're also just starting out and they don't know what's going on. They want to be the best top that they can be, or they've just seen something and was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to come in and see what this is like. And just being able to like, hold space for that. I just always feel so honored by. And then on the same coin, some of the clients that I do have are people who are, full on lifestyle players who are experienced. And then I'll have couples who come in who are learning to how to like spice up their love life and things like that, and all of the in-betweens. And so, I know that there's like that common misconception of like submissives are like doormats, but I think being able to, I don't know, for me in terms of my communication skills, I really like the idea of being able to engage with somebody where even if I'm feeling uncomfortable by something, I can offer other suggestions so that way we can both reach that mutual goal without it being a complete like stopgap. And so, there's definitely different ways of going, hey, I don't feel comfortable by this, but we can do X, Y, and Z. And, I think that's where a lot of my theater kid tendencies come from, where it's like the yes and game. But yeah, no, that combination of not only being able to learn more about myself and what sort of things I enjoy and how to become a better communicator when I'm dealing with more sensitive subjects like that, because a lot of people do still feel very deeply ashamed by their desires. They do feel a lot more of the stigma that a lot of us as professional sex workers have kind of learned to unravel. And so, yeah, helping people through that has been really awesome.
I love that. I mean, the way you talk about it sounds so similar to pro doming too. And I think like, yeah, there is, I don't know, I think it's very cool. Like I also just like don't understand the stereotype that like submissives are doormats. I'm like, y'all are some of like the strongest people that I know. We're just like so like, I mean, like look at any of your content, like just not what's happening. And yeah, I one thing in hearing you talk about that, I'm curious what like aftercare looks like in the context of a professional submissive session. It's something I think about a lot, is how when we talk about aftercare, we talk about submissives more than like doms also needing aftercare. But I also imagine in the context of being like a professional worker in that situation, the like dynamics of aftercare are a little bit different. And I'm curious how you navigate that in your scenes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, that's a great question. For me, because I play at such an extreme level, I don't really find myself needing aftercare for, professional scenes. I'm able to kind of separate what I'm doing from my own personal interests because it's not about me. I'm creating a service and I'm helping somebody else explore through their journey and figure out those nuances that they're looking for. So I think in terms of aftercare, if anything, like you were saying, a lot of people still don't correlate, oh, DOMs need aftercare, da, da, da. And so for me, I think I usually use that time that would normally be used for aftercare in like a typical like pro DOM session for me to kind of instill for the tops that I'm playing with, hey, what do you need for aftercare? How are you feeling? Let's have a check-in and see how you're feeling and whether you're, going through top drop or whether you're still struggling with feelings of like guilt or this or that or the other, things like that. So that way they can have a tool set, I guess, to reference for when they do go and play in their own personal lives. They realize that, yes, as a top, I can need aftercare too, and that's not a bad thing. It might be a necessary thing, and I feel more comfortable, having that conversation with my future partners.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like there is something so um I don't know, like educational about hiring a sex worker that is just like can be so like incredibly transformative. I think there's like the difference of like this is like the specific relationship that I'm interested in pursuing like with this person, and then like hiring someone because of their ability to like give you a specific experience and like put it in your body of like what is it like, oh, like do I get to ask for aftercare, like how do I do that, and like being able to create space like that for someone. And so you mentioned this I think twice already, and for people who aren't familiar with your work or your play or your lifestyle, I'm curious like a little bit about what like that the intensity of that like lifestyle play looks like for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, you're right. I take it so for granted. I keep forgetting that like we're kind of outside the normal social bubbles. So let's see. I guess for a starting point, most people who are watching this probably have some interaction with FetLife. So going off of that assumption, hopefully,
Yeah.
I think we all know that when, you're creating your profile, you can kind of choose where you're at with, okay, I play once in a while, I play, in just in the bedroom. And so for me, my category would fall under preferably 24/7. I live it as my life. Like that's kind of my thing. I really enjoy being able to, I don't know. I find that kink really helps me strengthen my bonds, even in a non-sexual way, with the people that I'm like dating or in a dynamic with, or any of the variations in between. I'm also like autistic, so me having like those clear ideas of like, okay, here's a dynamic, here's our protocols, here's how we interact. I feel like it also really helps me foster that, so that way I know that I'm making sure that my partner is taken care for in a very clear and concise way, so that way I'm not going, oh, well, I wonder if so-and-so's mad at me, and oh, I don't know how they're feeling about X, Y. We can have those clear conversations, and we know that it's okay because we both want each other to explore and grow and be curious about the other's experience. So yeah.
That's also part of why I love BDSM being neurodivergent. I was like, oh, rules? Like, hell yeah. Like, I fucking love a rule. Like, I'll give people rules. Amazing. Like, so great. Like, I now know how to interact at the social function, like, because there's rules is incredible. Um, yeah, and I feel like it gives so many people peace of mind, especially in the people that I play with. I feel like there's something about like being told what to do and like knowing what to do, like knowing how to bring your partner pleasure, like knowing how to make someone happy, like knowing what they'll do if they're like upset with you, and like having like protocol in place for that, like whether it be like punishment or like a check-in, I feel like is just so freeing on both sides because there's just like there's less worrying. And yeah, okay, so I became familiar with your work through a submissive of mine who was like, have you seen this? And I think it was part of you you eating a part of yourself for as like an act of devotion, I believe was the scene. And I think she was just like completely moved by this like act of devotion and just like, oh, like that feels like aligned with like how I would want to show devotion and like not something you really see. I feel like there are these like lifestyle components that you bring to the content that you make that is really lovely that like we don't get to see often because of like payment processors and things like that. Like I feel like all of the most fun content I want to make, like I don't know how to sell it, and like I feel like you sell some like really amazing, exciting, edgier play. And so I guess I'm curious about like how does devotion play a role for you in your DS relationships, and like what is actually, let me start. I know when we were talking about this, you mentioned being asexual. And I'm curious if you would chat a little bit about your relationship with asexuality, like BDSM, and then like we can move it into a conversation around devotion. I'd love.
Yeah, absolutely. So for asexuality, there's a scale. So there's people who are asexual and they're sex repulsed, they're sex neutral, and then they're sex positive. So being asexual, it's not about the action, it's about attraction. So the average person might go to a bar or club and go, oh, hey, look at so-and-so in the tight jeans. She's looking real good and stuff. And that just doesn't happen for me. And so that doesn't mean that I can't pursue, pleasure and sex and things like that. But the way that my arousal path happens is a lot different from like that visual stimulation that I think a lot of people might just inherently kind of take for granted, essentially. And so, especially navigating that through BDSM, where, there are some play parties where like you can't have fluid exchange, you can't have insertion, like there's different rules for every party and so on. Being able to still have what I feel like are very deep acts of intimacy without that conventional, oh, and now we're gonna fuck aspect kind of really helps solidify it for me. So that way, you're not only getting to know somebody at their most intimate moments, when they're like, at their most sadistic or when they're crying or when they're telling you about something that they might have been really ashamed to share with anybody else, but also like it's another form of getting to know someone on a deeper level that just doesn't have to be in regards to fucking, which there's nothing wrong with, but it's just so much fun for me, at least being able to like explore those different ways of doing so because it feels a lot more layered. And so getting to peel that apart as someone who's like really fascinated by people is just extra exciting for me as well.
Very fucking's overrated in general. I'm curious like if you would talk about like what that arousal path looks like for you. I feel like I'm very rarely the person who's like I'm not asexual, but I'm very rarely the person who is like, oh my god, like that, like watching a little imitation of people who feel that way. I was like, oh yeah, like that's not how I roll. And for me, it's always been about power, or like how people play with power is like part of my arousal path. Like I'm very like, I don't care what gender you are. Has like I've always been uh, like I just want to know like how we're like in relation together, and like I I came into kink much switchier than I am now, but it was like, like someone's got to win, and like I don't really care how it happens. Like I don't care like who it's with, but it has to be interesting and it has to be fun, and like it has to have like that texture that you're talking about. And I'm curious like what that looks like for you, of like if you're not like, ooh, you in the tight jeans over there, like let's go fuck, like what is it that like draws you into someone and like wants to like get to know them?
I think it's more so just I, I feel like it's bare minimum, but I feel like it's just the way that they interact and communicate from the get-go, you know? So for me, I'm very sex neutral. I can go either way. I can go months without having sex. If my partner is really sex driven, then like we can do that. I really don't mind either way. But for me, what really draws them in is, yeah, just I feel like communication breeds clarity, and I feel like that is sometimes a skill that not all of us are fortunate enough to have cultivated growing up, especially in the society that we live in. So being able to sit down with someone and know that like you can have an open, honest talk and that they're not bullshitting you, or that there's not any sort of, okay, well, they're saying this, but they mean that, da 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 da. And knowing that like they're straightforward about what they're into, what they're not into, and how they're approaching life, really draws me in, because then I get a sense as to obviously whether we're compatible or not, and you know, whether we can be friends or not, and or whether we, it's just all of those other things that goes with interacting with people at you know, at base level. And so it seems really like, you know, bare minimum, but for me, like that's kind of just the start of it. And from there, you know, it's okay, well, do I feel like they also have an understanding of like how to navigate in emergencies and navigate, you know, how they not discipline themselves in like a kinky way, but just, do you have an idea of what your structures, your goals, your idea of how you approach life is? Is it consistent? Are you open about whether it's consistent or not? And those sorts of things. Because I have a very like type A personality, I guess. And so while I won't fault others for not being on that same path, knowing that ahead of time really helps me. And it helps me, you know, understand how to engage better with people. And so if they're not honest with that, then where do we go with that, you know?
Yeah, so it sort of sounds like have you done the work? Like the like
There you
self,
go. Thank
like
you.
right,
My
like for
brain
like
was like in the back going, there's a phrase for this. And I was just not getting it.
because like hearing like yeah, like I feel like we're not taught how to have relationships. Like those are not like skills that most of us have. Like especially just like I feel like so many of us are like navigating like complex like trauma histories, like structural trauma histories, and like just trying to figure out like how to be in right relationship with each other, on top of then like how like where in that is like what I'm interested in. Am I aware of what I'm interested in? Like am I able to communicate it? Is this going to come out in like some weird triangulated way? um but yeah, I feel like good communication is such a turn on. And like I feel like there's like a level of like safety and comfort in knowing that like someone can communicate. I one of the questions I like to ask um in negotiations with people, or like just asking people about when something went wrong, is a newer question that I've been like incorporating, because like I like to hear about like how people repair or are able to repair, or like how they like internalize what happens when mistakes are made, because mistakes happen. If they're able to take responsibility for things of times like they've made a mistake. And just like my main question is like, do you feel comfortable stopping something and letting me know if something goes wrong? Because I'm like, that's the primary thing I need to know, is like especially like as someone who really likes edgy play. And I will say like that question doesn't work all the time, like because like we can say that we're able to, and like in the moment if we're triggered, you know, like it's not always something that we have access to. But like as someone who likes edgier play, I like to know what someone's relationship is to like, especially as someone who like does CNC play. Like I like if we go too far, is there space to come back from that, is something that I also like want to know if I'm doing. And I only do that type of play with play partners and like people I have like really established relationships with. But I'm wondering if there are any questions in like your negotiations, both like lifestyle and professional, that you found to be helpful, especially with like some of the edgier play that you do, or like how you build to that.
Yeah. So as a professional, I don't really tend to do a lot of edgier scenes. A lot of my clients tend to be on the newer side, and the ones who are experienced, we still have very specific parameters for that. So there's not a lot of edge play that I that I like, that's one of my boundaries, is doing edge play like professionally in sessions and so on. In my personal life though, yeah, just like you were mentioning, asking like, hey, what was a time that sticks out to you that something went wrong, and like, what did you do after that? How did you recover from that? Because yeah, I think I saw a tweet a couple of days ago that I feel like resonated so well, where it's like, I can't trust you to play harder if I can't trust you to begin with, in terms of whether you're going to be honest with that. Because like, you don't want somebody to tell you, oh yeah, I can do this thing. It's going to be great. Da, da. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, by the way, I've only done this one time and that was like 6 years ago. And I don't, it's just so disheartening because, obviously everyone has to start somewhere, but it's like, how people will respond to that question also lets you know a lot about them, and whether they are going to be like upfront and honest about their needs, what's going wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And so I definitely agree with that.
I have on my website too, on my contact form, is like, when was the last time you cried? Which is a question I
Cool.
find really helpful because, right, like if someone's like, I cried watching TV the other day, like, or I haven't cried since my grandfather's funeral 15 years ago, I'm like, how in touch are you with your emotions? And like, it's not like how much I trust what you're saying to be true, but like trusting the emotional response cues that I'm getting from you. Like,
Exactly. Because everyone
yeah,
has a different way that they like will respond to things and so on. And so, I mean, you hear about it when you're like watching like those true crime things all the time, where half of the crowd will be like, oh, well, he didn't cry at the hearing, so he must be guilty. And some people are like, well, he didn't cry because he's still traumatized and he's still healing from it. And so like, there is no right or wrong way. But yeah, especially in a scene, it really helps knowing like how people will usually, present those emotions, so that way you're not, putting your own ideas of expectations onto them when they're like, oh no, I usually do X, Y, and Z, instead of whatever the quote unquote normal reactions are. So you have a better indicator of when to check in and what's okay and what's not. So I definitely agree.
it's really interesting. I also see a lot of queer clients, and I will say, like, the answers from cis men and from uh queer and trans folks are very different. Like, I feel like there's a lot of um uh that's the one place I find gender differences of just like how people are like taught to emote.
Yeah, those cultural like socializations and the ways that people are like brought up and stuff. Because yeah, unfortunately, men aren't really given that outlet to express their emotions freely and things like that. And some of them are slowly coming around to it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm trying to work on being more open and so on." And some people are like, "Oh well, no, guys don't cry. That's it." And you're just like, "Okay, we've got some work to do."
I somehow bring this up in every interview that I do. The one of my, I think because it's like a word that's just like hooked in my brain, but traditional male alexithymia, of like the like cultural like infusion that like men don't cry, creates like a structure where cis men are like not taught how to both feel their feelings, but then they like lack the language. They can like lack the language to be able, and anyone can. I feel like there's alexithymia and for like neurodivergent folks too, like from trauma. There's so much of that, like in it, going back to like what we're talking about of like how we're impacted by our histories and like what we're taught, our ability to be able to like communicate our experience differs so greatly from person to person, and it can
Yeah.
impact your play a lot.
No, absolutely. And so, yeah, things like that, especially when you're doing like negotiations for a professional scene, those are so important. And so, like, good on you for being able to be like, yeah, so especially for like American cultural whatever's and stuff, let's narrow down on these things because, yeah, they're so important. And when you're doing check-ins, having all of that information under your belt gives you like the resources to go, okay, I know something's going wrong, even if they're not doing the
Yeah, I feel like that's rarely the it's also just like rarely the case. Like, to me, crying, I feel like that is like something's going right in that specific
Yeah.
instance, and like it's the like quiet, withdrawn, um like less responsive, but people respond so differently to pain. And I think like um yeah, I guess I'm just thinking about the different ways that people will respond to pain. And then I'm thinking about from you of like different ways you might respond to like your dom's pleasure. And I would be super curious to hear you chat about that.
Yeah.
Or like what drive I guess like it's like what drives you as a submissive.
I just think my partner's pleasure. Like at baseline, it's that because I'm into such a wide range of things. So for me, a lot of my play style is if I find that we're compatible, if I feel like you're, gonna listen to me and we know how to like exchange communication and things like that, then at baseline, I'm always excited to adapt to whatever my partner's fetishes and interests and kinks are because I'm into so many things that like there's no way that I can narrow it down. One week I'm feeling like this, the other week I'm feeling like that. Whatever. It's not, you know what I mean? So yeah, just making sure that my partner is having fun and is feeling pleasure, and that's how I gain my pleasure. It, I wish it was more complicated than that, but I'm a woman of simple means.
I feel like that's part of like submission outside of sexual submission too. It's like definitely something I like look for in lifestyle subs is my pleasure like one of the most important things to you? And I feel similarly too just about like fetish interests, but like from the reverse end of like I'm into whatever you're into because it will have the most impact on you if like you have all of these associations with these things and we can like kind of like push it and play with it. And then so it's like if like I love feet, but like if someone has like a heel fetish and I'm not into heels in this like weird scenario, like I would probably wear heels in it because I know the impact that it has on the other person. And like
Mhm.
in playing with submissives, like that's part of what I'm interested in is like the thing that makes them feel weak, the thing that makes them feel devoted, the thing that like makes the power exchange feel most potent in the moment. So I feel like
Absolutely.
the opposite end of what you're talking about. Like I'm also like, sure, like whatever you're into. Like give me the data to see how I can wield it. Uh, so I feel like it's interesting to hear you talk about. But like, yeah, like when I've chatted with a few DOMs who have lifestyle subs and like have asked them like what you look for, and like that's definitely something that comes up is like that prioritization of the other person's pleasure. I'm curious, like, when you're looking for lifestyle DOMs, like, what are the things that you're looking for in a partner?
Um, I really I really like for my partners to already kind of be knowledgeable within the lifestyle and be competent in their skill sets. Like we were talking about earlier, I do enjoy very extreme things. So a lot of these things, like, I can't walk into like the average play party and expect like the average person to know about, bloodborne pathogens and PPE and, how to do certain things correctly. And so, that kind of ends up narrowing my my options down a bit. But those are kind of the things that I really do need when I'm like actively like having that dialogue with somebody where we're like kind of considering those things. So just at least being willing to learn about those things, because we all have to start somewhere. And so at least if they're like, oh yeah, like let's take some medical classes together. Okay, I'm willing to learn about anatomy. Okay, like that's at least a starting point. But yeah, just first and foremost, competency, honesty. I feel like a lot of the things that maybe a lot of people would want in vanilla relationships, because for me, as long as I know that I can have those baseline needs met, and as long as I know that you're willing to either learn or at least be honest about what you are and aren't into, then we can go from there and everything else kind of falls into place for me.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like that's all right? That's what you can ask for is like that someone is like be honestly communicating their experience level too. I feel like is really important, and I've definitely had people on both like sides like not do that, and it's just like never a good, it's just like a recipe for for a disaster. Okay, so you've said a few times like more intense play, and I'd love if you like could talk a little bit about like what that looks like what intense play means to you, both like activity wise, like maybe share a story as well as like what psychologically it does for you, and like what does that like edgier, like heavier play bring you?
Absolutely. So some bullet points off the top of my head. I have done scarification and branding. I have done blood play, hook suspensions. I have done food restrictions where like I've only drank Soylent for like a month, or I part of one of my dynamics was I had to drink their morning piss every morning, and we were in that dynamic for like 2 years. There's been emotional sadism. There's been head shavings. There's, you know what I mean? And so, everybody has their own ideas of what's extreme. So those are kind of like the things just off the top of my head that I can think of.
I was like, I had also put a sub on a Soylent diet, and it's so romantic.
It's great.
I don't know.
So
I got
convenient. Like,
oh, I think like we're like starting a conversation around like devotion. I feel like is something that we both talked about, like feeling important in lifestyle dynamics. I'm curious, like when someone is like putting you on a Soylent diet, or when for like 2 years you're like waking up and the first thing you're putting in your body is someone else's piss. Like, what does that mean to you? I know for like me, like having, like I had a submissive begging me to play with food for a really long time, and it was a hard limit of mine for a really long time. And then one day I just like woke up and had an epiphany. I'm like, hot, let's do it. And it just felt like so deeply connective to have like that intimate control over someone. And it felt like deeply romantic. And I'm curious, like for you, like what those experiences for you were like, and like how did it shift, or like what did it mean for your relationship you were in at the time?
yeah, I think you put the nail on the head. I feel like it really does foster a more intimate connection, especially with me being ace. I don't, I do encounter in more allo partners where, for them, sex is like the key and only way that they explore intimacy. And so sometimes there is that stopgap of like, maybe I'm not in the headspace to do entirely sexual things. And so for me, adding those acts of devotion really helps express my intimacy. And it also creates just those bonding patterns, the same way that people will, oh, share a cup of coffee at the breakfast table before they go off to work, having those like those little moments in your day to day where you guys can still kind of, have that moment of quiet, even though everything else is still going on. So yeah, it's just furthering ways of creating and expressing that intimacy in just more layered ways for me.
I love that. Yeah, it's like you're like, some people text their partner all day. Like, I drink Soylent.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I know. We know that we're both thinking about each other. Uh, I Where do I want to go? Yeah, I'm curious because like for me, when I had my submissive on like a very restrictive like a food restriction play, it felt like very intimate. It felt very vulnerable for me because I'm like, this is like very edge play for me personally. Like edge play is different for, I feel like, everyone. I'm like, I'd be curious how you define edge play, but I feel like it's so different for everyone. And that was like an edgier thing for me to do personally, less edgy for her because she was like all she was fantasizing about and like super excited about, though it's still edgy. And like it felt very sexual to me. And I think one thing I've liked about BDSM is that I'm and have been a sexual person, but also like have like a very broad understanding of what sex can be, and like always I felt confused. I found like kink when I was like 18, so like all of my adult relationships have had an element of kink, or I was doing kink things with other people. And so like when I was trying to playing. So like I've been poly, like I haven't really been in monogamous relationships much because even if I wasn't having sex with other people, I'm like, okay, like someone's like doing my boots in a really like and like that feels like leather sex to me. So I'm like, I don't know how I would be lying to you if I was like that didn't feel like sex. And so I'm curious of like the way you talk about it sounds a little bit different and I'm curious if there's overlap or if you feel like it may be a little different for you.
Um, I mean, it's all definitely pleasurable, and I mean, in certain circumstances, it can be sexual. But like especially for like those like day-to-day things and things like that, it's just more like a pleasurable sense of pride almost. It's kind of like like if your partner's been gone all day and like there's been some chore at home that they've been kind of dragging their feet on that they've been dreading doing, and like you're like, oh well, I've got time, let me go and do it for them or whatever, and then they come back and they're like, oh babe, you shouldn't. It's kind of that ongoing sort of feeling where everything that we find ways to express, I know it's turning them on, it's getting them off, and that's awesome. And in return for me, like it's that sense of pride and knowing that I'm pleasing them, which is in turn pleasing me.
I like that. I love that. I feel like yeah, submissive pride is such a powerful thing. Um yeah, I'm just thinking, I don't know. I think there's something really beautiful and like profound and deep when you can like get to that level of it because it's also like a lot of trust and like uh to be able to like work up to those types of like really restrictive or like really edgy play. What is it about some of the edgier things that you enjoy?
Hmm. I think that it helps give me a sense of stability so that way I can go about my day to day in a more confident manner. So like I do a lot of extreme performances, and I'll hang from hooks and get my tits skewered and this that or the other, and I'll come off stage and people will be like, wow, I didn't know that the human body could do that. Like I don't think I can do that, but you know seeing you do that makes me go, well, man, maybe I can ask that cute guy at the grocery store out the next time I see. You know what I mean? And it's so for me, it's kind of like that sort of thing where I'm like, I've been able to push myself towards like these really extreme, emotionally dark, physically draining sorts of places. So, because I am very socially awkward and autistic and all the things and stuff like that, if I feel some slight discomfort at like, oh man, I gotta go like to the doctor today and I gotta talk about some stuff and I can be like, well, bitch, you just got your lips sewn shut. You're gonna be fine. Like, and it helps put those things into perspective better for me because I have those like physical reminders of times when it was like the worst case scenario and I survived.
Yeah, it's a different type of torture socializing.
Exactly.
I love the idea though of like, ooh, like baby, like you're gonna have to socialize later this week. Like let's sew your lips shut so you don't have to think about talking right now. It's just like very sweet, like way to process like the overwhelm uh stimulus of socializing or like going to doctors' offices. I love that of like, well, like, okay, like I can hang from hooks and like you can talk to that guy at the coffee shop. I think it's like an inspiring quotes from Cupcake for sure.
Like it all sounds really weird and like silly when I'm saying it out loud, but like that's
No,
just it's just how my brain like processes things. So like as it's coming out of my mouth, I'm like, bitch, what the fuck do you mean? And I'm like, I guess that's just how that's just always how I've approached it because there are so many like day to day things where like I'm so uncomfortable, like it's so anxious, like like I have to like sit down and do a round of okay, I gotta pay bills and oh god, I don't want to look at my banks. But you know what, bitch, you just like literally went and like got your fucking ass handed to you a couple of days ago. You're fine. You're gonna be fine. You're not gonna die. Like
I feel like so many people feel this way though, you know, I feel like I've never heard someone put it as like bluntly as you just did of like, yeah, like I get my my lips sewn shut so that like I can go to the doctor's office and like get through like like the terror and like torture of the mundanity and like overwhelmingness of like those situations. But like I hear people say all the time like my submission makes me feel strong, and I feel like those are the kind of like the like subtext, like so that I can go to the doctor. Like I need to know that I can like do both. I think it's like a really interesting way to like, it's like a physically tapping into your vulnerability in like, oh, a really profound way. To be so physically vulnerable in that. One thing I've been thinking a lot about is performance and performance studies. I think a lot about labor, sex work, and performance, and I also have had like a complicated history with a term like BDSM play, because like part of me was like super serious and like really obnoxious, and I'm like, it's not play, it's real, in a way that like I now I'm like, oh, like play is cathartic, play is plastic, play like gives us like space for like so much creativity. And I feel the same way about performance. It's like, you know, like even if I'm not feeling like my most dommy self, or like I'm like I had like a very real like bad disempowering experience like earlier, like going to the doctor will just be our shorthand. And like I'm like going to a session, it's like there is something about like stepping into like that aspect of myself that actually like does transform me like mentally in that space, and that transformation is very real regardless of if I am performing or not. And so I've been thinking a lot about performance, and like when we see theater is different than when we watch a film, because that's the same thing happening, whereas when we're watching like performers perform, like they are not impacted by their daily experiences, so we're also like it like the character is passing like through them, not as a blank slate or like an empty like vessel, but like they are impacted by like whatever is going on in their life, or like if like there's a different actor, like the performance will be different. And I guess I am wondering about like what your relationship is to some of the more intense performance acts that you're doing, some of the like sideshow acts that I saw you like presenting. I think you just had one recently. Yeah. And like how, if it feels like you're just performing something, or like is, I don't know exactly what my question is, but like what is it like for you as a performer doing some of these like very intense physical things that you're talking about, like making you feel strong in this really empowering way, like as a performance? Because I'm sure there's times too when you're performing and you're like, fuck, like I don't know if I want to necessarily like this isn't, I don't know, but like you're still in the performance and like putting on a good show, and like something, it's like it's still happening to you. I'm curious like what that is like, performing such intense acts in like
Yeah.
different headspaces.
No, absolutely. And it's funny that that you mentioned that, because there's this reoccurring gig that I have throughout the month of October at an amusement park, where we'll put on a series of shows. And so, you know, it's everything from like bed of nails to sword swallowing to like, you know, all of your classics. And one of them is like a pincushion act. And so, you know, my partner will put like a skewer through his bicep, and then we'll do double skewers through my cheeks and so on. And you know, this is out on the East Coast, so usually in October it's starting to get cold. It's very windy. It's an open air stage. Like I'm anemic, so everything really is like kind of shitty. But yeah, there's something about, you know, despite all of those things where you're like, oh man, maybe I didn't get enough sleep that night, or oh man, maybe I'm fucking freezing my ass off. When you get on stage and you look at all of those spaces, like it's you're there to transform them, and in that space, you're also putting yourself in their shoes, where you're like, I want to create this experience for them. I want them to be able to walk away and not feel like they, you know, wasted 30 minutes, an hour, whatever of their lives, like for nothing. And I want them to be able to walk away with the same feelings and emotions that I've gone through as I'm doing these acts. So I feel like it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, okay, I'm feeling shitty, but they're sitting there and me showing all of these like feats of strength or these entertainment aspects through performance helps them walk away going, oh, I've got something to remember this day by. Maybe it's something I can also carry on through my life. I can go talk to the cute guy at the grocery stand and so on, you know? On the other hand of that, on less, family friendly aspect of that, one of my more notable performances was me eating part of my thigh. And for that, it was a fun combination because the party that we were doing it was cannibal themed. And so my partner at the time and I were like, okay, well, what do we do with that? And I was like, well, wouldn't it be fun if we kind of did like a play on like Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling, but like maybe they're like on a romantic dinner date or something like that. And so we were playing with that. And so, we're both like theater kids and stuff like that. So it was fun kind of going through the idea of like, how do we connect the storyline with like, the performance theme and also what's within our skill sets and capability. And I was very fortunate that that partner was a very experienced body mod artist, knew how to do those sorts of things. So us talking about these things was kind of a breeding ground for, oh, and we can do this thing. And oh, we're also in a dynamic. So it's like a whole nicely layered sandwich of like, we have the skill set to do this. I know that this person is somebody that I absolutely trust. This is a way of showing my devotion on stage as well as in our personal life. And, what a fucking great way to hit the theme of the party out of the park. You know what I mean? So, yeah, being able to just take people on a ride, whether it's emotional, whether it's, just that mental, wow, if they can do that, then I can do X, Y, and Z. Like, it's just such a great unifier. And I think that's why we watch like TV and we watch movies and we listen to songs and things like that. It's because, whether it's just to sit there and have the time pass by or whether it's to take something away from it, we're all trying to find a way to connect with each other. And so I like being able to play my part in that. And I just so happen to have skill sets and abilities that other people enjoy watching. And so I can share that more.
I love that. It sounds like you throw a great dinner party. Just like through the roof. What kind of feedback do you get from folks like in the scene about your content and your performance?
Just a lot of, damn, bitch, you're crazy. But no, jokes aside, I live in Las Vegas now. But back when I was in Los Angeles, I was working at the same place that I regularly played at the same place that I regularly performed at, like Sanctuary was my like home dungeon. And so like, yeah, I would go to other dungeons and stuff, but like that was my home spot 9 out of 10 times. Like if there was a party that night, I was going to be there. And so it was just really fascinating because as I did more and more of like these extreme performances and things like that, I would go to like regular parties and try to do like, pick up play and like kind of approach people and they'd be like, oh, I'd have like these like, really, notorious scary quote unquote tops in our scene being like, oh no, I'm not playing with you. Oh no, you're too into, and I'm like, all I did was say hi. What are you talking about? Like, so like, having people like kind of just stick to that automatic assumption of like, oh yeah, she's going, 0 to 60 all the time, 24/7. And I'm like, no, I like, I like tickling play. I like ABDL. Like we can do soft cuddly. So, you know what I mean? This just happens to be like, if you're doing a performance, why not show off like the absolute best of the skill sets that you can in a venue that allows it? You know what I mean? So navigating that was always kind of interesting and fun because I'm always just kind of like, oh no, I'm really versatile. I really like a broad, span of things. So I can approach anybody and be like, hey, we're probably gonna have a good time. And most of them are like, no, we saw your performance. We can't handle you. I'm sorry. And I'm like, oh, okay. But on the other hand, having other people also go, hey, that was really inspiring. I wasn't maybe into X, Y, or Z kink and watching you perform it, it felt beautiful. It felt passionate. I felt a connection, that made me consider starting to look into classes for this. Or, oh, it made me feel more confident about, talking to the cute guy at the grocery store, and just all of those variances of, oh, I want to explore this kink more, or, oh, I was never really into this, but like watching you perform made me kind of feel a little less squeamish or a little less like triggery about things, or, oh, I feel like I can be more outgoing or whatever, because I know that people aren't so fragile as we think that we are. And so that's been really rewarding and really nice.
I love that. I feel like you don't often hear of doms like being like like which I feel like is a vote of confidence, to be honest. So, like, I'm maybe frustrating, because you're like, no, like I'm like, I feel like I get that sometimes too, where, or like as like a top, and I'm like also love getting my boots done. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna dive into like really intense play with
Like we're multifaceted. It's okay. We can talk
yeah,
about
also
other things.
like, pick up cannibal play. It feels like I don't know if that's happening all the time, you know? Like yeah. Yeah, I feel like it misses the like multifaceted part. But I think that's really lovely when someone like watches some of your content or like watches a performance and is like, I am now into this. I feel like is such like a vote of confidence and like such like a remark on your both like performance and like how much you're able to share in that performance to be able to like instill or install fetishes in people is so cool. I had my I was like at some party in LA and I had my leathers done by a friend who I have this like great chemistry with, and like she was like shining and worshiping like me like head to toe leathers, and like I had a few people come up to me who was like, I didn't know boot blacking could be that, and now I need to learn how to do that to someone.
Yes.
And like I think there were like a few boot blacks who were like born out of that scene who were like, ah yes, I now need to go learn these skills.
That's fucking fantastic. Hell yeah.
It's so fun too. I feel like they're like, I don't know, that like contagion effect of doing something you love really well publicly and having it be like admired and like put into other people's bodies too. Do you
Absolutely.
do you think of yourself as an exhibitionist? Or like what's your relationship to?
It's funny because by like all accounts on papers, I should be, but for me, like I'm pretty neutral about it. Like it doesn't get me off. You know what I mean? It just so happens, and like it. I mean, I don't know how to say it and not sound like not humble, but like most of the times, I found that when I was playing publicly, people would stop and watch. Like even if I was like in the corner in like the back room of, you know what I mean? It just always so happened to end up like that. And so I think I've become like an exhibitionist by other people's de facto, because for me, I'm just kind of like, oh, I'm just here doing my thing. But because other people are watching it and gaining something from it, it makes me feel good, but it's not really quite a sexual thing. It's not like something I'm constantly seeking out, really. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I people are surprised when I'm like, I'm not an exhibitionist. Like I'm actually like quite shy, and like I feel like I had a friend the other day be like, Shy, you're a dom. I'm like, yeah, like aren't we all shy? Like I don't know what you're talking. Like aren't we all awkward? Like I don't know. I don't know what dom area you're coming from, but that's not the case or your experience. But I hosted a like a masked play party last week and had like a scene, and like I just like I had to like leave the main room and was like in the hallway doing it because I'm like I like some attention. Like I like playing in public. I like playing in scenes, but I don't like being like the center of attention or like people like hearing people's comments. Like I just I that just, it doesn't do anything for me but besides like distract me.
Yeah, because now you're suddenly self-conscious and you're like, oh.
Yeah, I'm like, don't look at me. Yeah, but I feel like it's surprising to hear like performers talk about that.
Yeah.
What's your favorite? Like as we like start wrapping up the conversation, like if you have any questions for me, feel free to ask. And also, like I'm curious, like what's some of your favorite content to make when you're like making content to put out there online?
Um, I really like making I like making ABDL content. I feel like that's really fun. So whether it's straight up just, oh, I'm a businesswoman and suddenly I got tricked into being a baby and now I'm wearing diapers, or whether it's just straight out like, just age play scenes. I really enjoy kind of like POV submissive type of content. So that way, once again, not everyone has the ability to go to their local dungeon. And I realize what a privilege that is, especially, coming up in the scene in LA where like, there was always a handful of them around and stuff. So I try to make a lot of those when I have the inspiration to do so, because once again, everyone's starting out from somewhere. And if I can kind of put that little seed out there to have them go further in their journey, outside of that standard second fuck, which there's nothing wrong with, but, just the same way that like femdoms will have their POVs and things like that, I feel like there's not enough sub POV kind of things that,
Just like I don't feel like I've even seen a ton of
yeah.
that. Would that be like talking at the camera, like how you do anything kind of vibe? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then when I have models available, I really do like doing like boy girl DS type of things like that. So yeah, whether it's, leather boot worship, whether it's, impact play, those sorts of things. And just being able to really express that chemistry, because, solo content does kind of get a little lonely after a while. And so being able to kind of show those dualities where, yes, I can do a submissive POV and you can start getting ideas in your head and feeling like, oh, this is the connection that I've been looking for. Let me explore further, versus also, oh, yeah, and yeah, I jerk off to her all the time and she's super hot. And oh, look, she's with a dude. And oh, yeah, she's doing what she does best. Like, and so all of those things are just really fun for me.
I feel shocked, but I haven't thought about submissive POVs. Like I feel like I do make some like femdom POVs, but it makes so much sense. I think just because like I'm not seeing it so much, and it's so interesting because right, like if we're thinking about heteronormative porn, it is with like a woman or a femme person like taking on like an inherently submissive role is like what is identified as submissive or as vanilla. Like I feel like in like where we're at culturally is like cool, spanking, choking, like as long as like you have like long hair and like a red lip, like that's the normative thing that's going on in this scene. And like sometimes I just find it so shocking, but I feel like how do you find the market for that of like the submissive POV? And like I imagine because it's so undersaturated that people must be like really grateful to find that content too.
So I started doing it because I start for my sex work journey. I started doing in-person professional submissive services at Sanctuary. And then a few like a year or so later, then I started doing video work. And so if anything, I felt like I started putting it out there just because I had so many clients who wanted to come and see me in person, but who weren't able to for whatever reason. And so that kind of really motivated me so that way I could be like, oh, hey, even though you can't come and see and play with me in person, here's kind of something that might sort of fill that gap in a way. And so it kind of just took off from there. So
I love that. I'll have to check out more because I feel like I haven't seen that from you. So I feel like I've seen a lot of your stuff, but maybe also I just love your edgier stuff. So like that's what I'm drawn to. I know you also have some. Well, I'm curious too, like how you navigate payment processors with some of the content that you make. Like I think I saw one of your clips of like you sleeping. I can't remember the name of that kink, or like kind of like forced intoxy vibes, which is just like I think we have a lot of interest in common. I'm like I don't know how I would like sell this. Like how do you navigate like making some of the edgier content, which it seems like the stuff you're into, and sharing that?
yeah. So back in 2014, 2015, there was still a lot of like heavy-handed payment processor rules, but they weren't quite as heavy before all of the, sus to foster, this and that started rolling in and stuff. So when I first started getting into, the more digital aspect of sex work, I was able to kind of put those things out there and kind of sort of fly by the radar. Then everything kind of got a lot more heavy-handed, and I had to stop doing that and start doing like a lot more like more vanilla fetish kind of things like that. And then recently, a couple of sites have popped up that have been like entirely like Bitcoin based. And so, I'm starting to like really slowly advertise those again, re-editing videos from like way back in, 2014 and stuff like that, and put them up on those sites and see if I get any more traction from them. And so it's been really definitely frustrating navigating, because it's like, you can turn on HBO and all of these other shows, and, True Blood, their whole advertising thing was everybody naked covered in blood, but God forbid you jerk off to it. So yeah,
God forbid it comes from someone's body naturally, or like they're menstruating. Like,
exactly.
ooh.
Exactly. What a
So
fucking
sad.
thing. God forbid.
It's something
Yeah.
that pisses me
So
off too. Like, it's like,
Mhm.
okay, right, like we call it art. It has funding like it's art. It's not like coming from an underground economy because it's art. And like you can sell it. Like you can sell it in a gallery. People like take photos of us on the set of porn shoots that we
Mhm.
can't sell that porn that we're filming, and
Yep.
then sell those images in
I remember that
galleries
shit.
for like thousands of dollars when like
That
we
shit
can't
pissed me
even
off so
find.
much.
Yeah. And I'm like, because you have a fucking name, because like you're calling it art, because like the sole purpose isn't for like sexual gratification. I just helped throw a conference on the resurgence of Victorian era moral policing a la Comstock and like obscenity, and like the which was very interesting. And I was involved in making a zine for it, and like largely about obscenity. And I was learning that I learned at the conference that the root of the term obscenity comes from like offense to the church and the state, which I had
Mhm.
always just thought it was the church. I didn't know that it also like was that which offends like the like white picket fence, the like construction of like the like white nuclear family. And it just makes so much sense how like trans health and abortion and like any form of anything that's like deviating from like procreative like nuclear family sex becomes wrapped up in these obscenity cases, and like with all of the legislation that we're seeing. And I just like I don't know, like the art thing. And so like part of it I interviewed, there's an interview in the zine with Lorelei Lee, who's one of their films with two of their films were part of an obscenity case against John Stagliano like 10 or 15 years ago. And they said that they like started giving like a lot of lectures after about like obscenity and art. And like just like I've had so many conversations with them about like it's like just like this, of just like how fucking annoying it is when other people can profit off of our body and our labor, but like you as an individual filming yourself alone can't sell that clip for no known reason.
Yep.
Just
God forbid. uh, I've had so many like multi-hour rants over the years about this. I'm just so you're preaching to the choir. That's the
I
long
just went
story
on
of
a
it.
rant. I'm sorry. I was just like it's
No, I'm
it's just,
talking about for myself though, because you
oh
know what
my
I mean?
god.
Like every couple of weeks there will be
Yeah.
something, or like, clips for sale will like say something to the effect of, oh, you can't do this because da da da. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That's not the case. And you can't overturn it. You can't, you know what I mean? It's just always so fucking frustrating, especially when your finances depend on it. So you're preaching to the choir
I
yeah.
know. And like I think it's it's just so, I don't know, the one that bothers me so much is that like I have to call myself as a mommy, I'm like I have to call myself stepmommy. I have to like mislabel myself like no, like I'm your biological mother in
Especially in a
this
solo
scenario.
scene. In a solo
What?
scene about
I
these.
know.
Like, Yeah. Ridiculous.
And I feel like it's something that like is cloaked from viewers. And like one thing that I'm super interested in is like how payment processors like ridiculous censorship of the content that we make changes desires. And like one thing I'd been like thinking about was like on TikTok, like heavier people or people with like big tits were just like getting censored so much. And so all of a sudden, all of the like models were like wearing things that showed like just the tiniest little bit of underboob. And then you started seeing like celebrities showing underboob, and like the next season of fashion was all like, how much underboob can we show? And I feel like there, or like even just like the meme of, oh hey step bro, like you're stuck, steps in, like you're stuck in the dryer, you know, and like that comes from porn censorship. Like that would not be, there would not be the step in it if like that wasn't the main like search term on Pornhub, and it's the main search term on Pornhub because you can't say brother. And I think it's so interesting how it shifts desire.
Yeah.
Like it has.
And I'm like, there's that thing about, sex workers are the canaries in the coal mine, really, and stuff. So, like we all speak out about it on our platforms. We're always talking about like, hey, the credit card companies have way more power in dictating what you can and can't enjoy. And like, you're probably not realizing it as the average person and stuff. And, then you get the, oh, well, you're a whore. You shouldn't be political on your things. But like, literally, these are the things that roll over into dictating what you can and can't do eventually. But you know what I mean? And it always sounds like we're being so extremist, but then we see over the years how these things do eventually trickle and affect because they test it out on the sex workers. We try to tell people about it. People tell us to shut up. And then all of a sudden we've got all of these new laws and shit popping up where people are like, this is an outrage. What do you mean we can't? Da, da, da. Or like when like weed started getting like legalized in certain states and stuff like that. But then there was like the whole credit card thingy. And that's what people were like, oh, what do you mean the credit card companies are telling me I can't? We tried to tell you, but
yeah, or like they're now asking for clients like IDs to view our porn. It's like, oh, like maybe I shouldn't have been such a mouthy whore on my Twitter. Like, what a bad girl.
Oh my god! Like we're doing this for your own best interest, but fine, whatever, sure, okay.
Yeah, I hate that. Like that. Like you shouldn't be talking about this. I'm trying to jerk off, and it's like, cool. Like I'm a fully fledged person, and this is my social media account. I'm doing my best. Like, share what feels relevant. Okay, well, I'm definitely preaching to the choir.
We're like, oh, damn you, Lisa.
I feel like for edgier play, it's like it's such a big part of like the work that we do is like trying to navigate like how I can sell it. Like, what can I say? I remember like on OnlyFans, I almost lost my account because I'm like, now I'm thinking of like where I'll just post this on YouTube. I think will be the best place for it after all of our subject matter. But like, I would say like my hypnotic voice, not even like a hypno clip, it would get flagged by the algorithm. And like, I'm not even typing it, I'm saying it. So it's just like, they're just like catch up in their ways to police us so fast. And I'm like, that's just part of my speech pattern, even when I'm not talking about hypno play. Like one of my favorite forms of censorship was my name, Mistress Blunt, was censored on one of the clip sites as Mistress Smoke. And it like took me like 3 years to realize this because it was only on the client side that you could see it. And I'm like,
wow.
Like, there's like no nuance. Isn't that wild? And I'm like, this is fascinating to me because blunt is just a word. Or like when you like type half of a word, but it like restricts it.
No, I was going to say definitely like I've got like a master thread somewhere because like, I do a lot of like description writing for not only myself, but other people and stuff. And so like one of the other ones that I'm like, that's coming to mind right now is somebody was saying for the sake of, but even though it didn't have the apostrophe or anything, they flagged it because it looked like sake. If it looks too much like a banned word, then you can't even use it. And I'm like, what do you mean if it looks too much like a banned word? What do you like? And now we can't even use words that also have double meaning. Like, cause yeah, blunt, but we're going to go straight to the drug reference and there's no nuance, but because we're all using algorithms instead of actual people.
Yeah.
fuck you, I guess. Like,
Wow, sake and
it's just
sake. Wow.
frustrating. Yeah, yeah. The
There's
other one
so many.
was, what is it? Somebody was doing like one of those like, like 1950s kind of robber cop heist, whatever's and stuff. And they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna rob this joint. And they were like, oh, you said the word joint. We can't use, and I'm like, so I can't talk about my arm? I can't use the fucking colloquialism? You're straight to drugs. Okay. All right. So I get it.
You're like, where's the assumption that in my Forced Intox video, any sort of drug is present? Like, that is a leap and a bound.
But like this was for somebody's like, just straight up regular like bondage kind of like, findom kind of whatever stuff. They're like, oh yeah, we're gonna just rob this joint, da 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 and stuff like that. And I'm like,
so silly.
they're not looking at context, they're not looking at the rest of the descriptions or nothing. It's just, oh, the thing censored it, it flagged it, you can't appeal to it, and that's that. Okay.
Yeah, there's no nuance. It's bananas. Okay, I feel like I could chat with you about censorship forever or extreme edge play, but I'm curious, is there anything else you wanted to share or make sure we touch on before we like wrap up this conversation?
I think we've kind of touched on everything. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I love chatting with you. Well, if folks want to find you, how would they go about doing so?
They can visit my website, submissive.com. I am on Twitter for now, knock on wood, as Cupcake X. I am on my like 6th or 7th Twitter account, so if you can't find me there, just Google Cupcake Sinclair and you'll probably find me crawling back again from the dead. So, yeah.
What I say too. I'm like, if you want to find me, Google Mistress Blunt, and hopefully Google will still be around for sex workers because everything else feels like just like ephemera. Okay. Well, it was so great chatting with you. Thank you so much for the conversation. I appreciate you.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate you.